From beyond the farthest reaches of our galaxy they come. Two brains pulsing with a strange energy. These space brains come to share their love of science fiction movies.
Hi and welcome to Space Brains, the show where we joy watch sci-fi movies and then tell you what we loved about them and how you can love them too. I'm Surrey and this is Mark.
Hiya.
Tonight we're talking about Passengers, so consider this your spoiler warning.
Warning.
Stay tuned for next week's movie at the end of the show.
So, Surrey, what is it about science fiction movies that you like?
I really like the way they can show us a brilliant and hopeful future, but also, I suppose, provide that warning that computers will one day kill us all. Being a computer programmer, that's important to know exactly how to program my computers for maximal death. Survival. Okay, so tonight's movie, Passengers, and it was released in 2016. Stars Jennifer Lawrence and Chris Pratt. Mark, how about you tell us what it was about?
So, basically Passengers is a film set in the future. We're on a spaceship that's traveling from Earth to Homestead 2, which is a planet that they will resettle. It's a private company resettling planets, and apparently this is what that company does. And everyone on board is basically in hyper sleep. They're in pods, and by a meteorite that hits the spaceship at the start of the story, Chris Pratt's character Jim is suddenly awoken and he's out of his hypersleep and he can't get back in, can he? So yeah, he's stuck on his own on board this massive ship, and that's basically the setup of the story.
He's supposed to be woken up 4 months before the end of the voyage, got 90 years out of 120 years. So he was basically going to die of old age.
Yeah. So the problem for him as a character straight away is that, you're not going to get off this ship. You're stuck there. So it was an interesting concept, I think, an interesting sort of, question on humans, that we are awoken alone, isolated, and you're going to die on this ship. What would happen to you? What would happen to you as a person? So I think there's a great scene where with the bartender, he's like, I'm going to die here. I can't be here. I'm not allowed to be here anymore. And the bartender tells him, hey, just live a little. And so he starts to live up a little bit. There's basketball, there's dancing, there's, playing, there's trying to get the ship going or trying to get help. But he actually does try to have a bit of playing going on in that scene. Yeah. Well,
that's the theme being said to him and telling him to. We asked him, says, you think you're out of place, you don't think you belong here. I have a feeling that it doesn't matter where you were in the universe, you'd still have that feeling.
Yeah.
And I guess that was sort of the theme that carried through the rest of the movie.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Mark, how'd you watch it? Where did you watch it? Cinemas, at home? On the toilet?
No, I just got to watch it at home on a Saturday night, actually, with my wife. So it was a nice kind of relaxed viewing in front of the TV. And that first viewing experience, I really got a lot of enjoyment out of. I thought that I was surprised with the start of the film. I was surprised with that sort of promise of the premise, that idea that, okay, here's a character alone. And really, once he comes to and he's realizing that he is alone and he can't get to the captains and everyone else is asleep, meeting that character of the bartender played by Michael Sheen was, to me, a real wow, this is a total homage to The Shining, and really the film itself really touches on a very similar science fiction version of The Shining. So, and straight away that I kind of sat up in my chair. I just did it then. And I was like, oh, wow. And that's what I said to my wife, Tanya. I was like, wow, this is a version of The Shining, but in science fiction realm, and it really grabbed my attention.
I didn't catch that at all. haven't really seen much of The Shining. I think the only Shining I saw was the new remake, which I seem to think wasn't terribly memorable because I can't remember it.
No, so I'm totally talking about the Stanley Kubrick 70s Shining, the original one. So Jack Nicholson.
I read the book, so
yeah.
And when I watched the more recent, I don't know when that was, but that I remember that kind of, it wasn't close to the book.
Yeah,
but I don't know how so The Shining, I've got to say, I do love that bartender Arthur, Michael Sheen, I think the guy was.
Yes,
yeah. Yeah, he played a very excellent android.
Yes.
He was at once, he would seem to say things that seemed to be human, but by the end you realise they're kind of a bit generic.
Yeah.
Or they were factual, like pure facts based, like, how long until we get to Homestead? About 90 years.
Yeah.
And then he would say, well, what am I supposed to do? And he'd pause for a moment and you could see processing. And then he'd start giving his, what seemed to be, wisdom. But by the end of it, you started to realise, that's kind of, it sounds like he's repeating something from Wikipedia. Like he's just done a search on Google search, what is some wisdom to give someone? And then he's just given the top answer.
Yeah.
So I think that was fantastic as well. Yeah, I watched it on Saturday night as well with my wife. I purposefully avoided reading any critics' reviews and any trailers because I wanted to go into it with no particular expectations. I find that's the best way of enjoying films. There have been a few movies where the advertising leading up to it has actually improved the viewing experience. But for the most part, you either get sort of spoilers or it misrepresents it. So it was very good. It was certainly a very entertaining film to sit and watch with the wife, the kids in bed.
Yeah, definitely. And I had as I said, I kind of sat up in my chair because of that bar scene. And I think Michael Sheen played that robot really well. And the fact that he sort of literally says, I'm an android. He corrects Jim, Chris Pratt's character, in that first scene with him. He goes, I'm an android, Yeah. And then also when he does say, Jim says to him, I'm awoken out of my hypersleep, the pod. And he said, well, no one... They kept referencing in this film that the pods never malfunctioned before.
Pods never fail.
They never fail. And he says it to him. He says, well, I'm here. That's what Jim replies to Arthur. And Arthur, tweaks, he just twitches.
Yeah.
And he goes, right, yeah, you've proved me wrong, basically. But I liked that, and you're saying it too, it's almost like it was bartender cliches. But because he's an android... it was acceptable as an audience, and it was quite nice. It was a reassuring character. And if you do happen to look at Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, you'll notice the decor of that bar is very similar. The colours are very similar. And it was a bit random when you look at the rest of the spaceship, how that bar looked, And I did actually look into it, and the designers did decide to model that off a New York bar. They wanted it to kind of try to make it cozy, and that's what they were actually going for.
Yeah, what I got from it was that the contrast is walking around the rest of the decks, and it's all that sort of sleek cruise line, futuristic sort of look, and there's this bar which is looking very 1920s, I want to say.
Yeah. And
reds and browns and the sorts of colours that are not anywhere else in the whole ship.
Yeah,
not in the bedrooms, not in the walkways, nowhere.
Yeah, no, so it was a great experience. And I think overall the whole, when you take in the whole story, the whole narrative, you're taken on this journey, you're given a very good question, which then Jim, Chris Pratt's character, decides to awaken, this moral question. He decides, no, I can't be alone. I have to awaken, the beautiful Jennifer Lawrence, of course. And so he picks her and he wakens her, and it's a real moral question. And then he doesn't tell her. They have a good relationship. It's very meaningful, I think, throughout the development of their relationship. And then there's a great midpoint because she discovers that, he's lied to her and that he did wake her up. And I think she returns serve on that. She's really, she's quite violent to him. She's got, she isolates himself from him again. And as the story then progresses, we then get into a crux scene of that the ship is failing and they have to fix it to survive. So it's a great sort of overall story arc that took me on a real good adventure. It took me through all those kind of emotional highs that you want from a big Hollywood blockbuster sort of film where, you've got an interesting character, an interesting premise, a good moral question, good characters with a bit of dimension, and really you're sort of taking on all of those kind of key characteristics that you expect from a film.
Well, one of the things that I noticed was after I watched the movie, I did go and have a look at what the critics would say.
Yeah.
They didn't like the film. Largely, I think, because they were focusing very heavily, saying on this moral decision.
Yeah.
They seemed to be of the opinion that the point of the film was that question of whether to wake her or not, even though we full well knew she had to be awoken in order for the story to progress. And I had to disagree. I was looking there going, I don't think they watched the same movie I did, because I was watching a fairy tale, kind of a reverse Sleeping Beauty, in that the Sleeping Beauty wants to stay asleep and Prince Charming doesn't really want to wake her up but feels he has to.
Yep.
It's either that or he's going to jump out the airlock. Fair enough. And the point of the movie was more the moral or the moral of the story being that you can find happiness in your life wherever you are. Like the bartender said at the start, like Arthur said, he says, it doesn't matter where you are in the universe, you're probably still going to have this feeling of not belonging, of not having your life. And this was, I guess, raised by Aurora. That's Jennifer Lawrence. She's like, oh, you've taken my life off me with that. Really, he hadn't. It wouldn't have mattered. Like, she was already on that ship because she felt she had no life. Like that was it. She's going to, 120 years to get there, write a book, and then another 120 years back. So she said, I think, 250 years before she got back to Earth. So she knew that all of her friends and family, everything, were going to be dead, and every part of her old life would be washed away. So she already had basically chopped off her life. So I found that interesting. A lot of people sort of saying it's basically murder. I thought, it's more like kidnapping.
Yeah, and I mean, on that, what you're just saying as well, I mean, as a theme question, Aurora, she's reinforcing that theme throughout her storyline anyway, because we learn at the very start she lives in her father's shadow because he's a prize-winning author. Yes, she is awoken, and her reaction to that, and then when we get a glimpse of her past through photos and stuff, in the sort of, as we head into the third act,
a little
video of her friend that basically is employing her to go out there and actually live a life, so it sort of sounds like she's a hesitant kind of person in living life. And then that is her question at the end as well, is to decide, because she gets the chance right at the end again to go back to sleep. So she's showing us that thematic question again. So I agree. I actually did a bit of Googling after watching as well, and a lot of people thought this was a bit of a stalker film as well. That was a bit of a critique that, it was quite a horrible idea that this person basically murders her and then she has to fall in love with him and she's forced to fall in love with him.
I disagreed with that because
I do too. Yeah.
I understand the whole.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the surface, it seems like a terrible thing to have done to her, but the larger picture being, again, that she wasn't exactly having any real life anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
She was intending to spend a couple of years in this homestead, which probably would have been a primitive compared to what she's used to, farm.
Yeah.
And it would be hard, and then she was intending to turn around and go back to Earth. 250 years is a long time to be away from planet.
That's right. Yeah. You'd be generations later, wouldn't you? But yeah, I disagreed with those critics as well. I thought that in fact it was trying to tell a different story really than what those critics were picking on. There seems to be a lot of that's the theme out there in criticizing this film, that it's a stalker film, that the woman has to fall in love with the man to live a life. but I think she actually is given the chance. She's actually given the chance to try to, rescue Jim, and she does. And then she brings him back to life with every effort that she's got, and she does do that. And then right at the end, she gets the double chance to go back to sleep.
She also had the chance to kill Jim.
Yeah, she did as well.
If she was truly felt as if he had murdered her, she had all the chance to. He actually sits there and stops defending himself.
Yeah.
And she's got a great big chunk of, what is it, a crowbar of some sort?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
A science fiction crowbar.
So she does, so to sort of, put that into context, she has the chance to get away from her stalker. She's not forced to totally in that moment in those different scenes.
I do like that, because if you go back to the Sleeping Beauty sort of situation, Prince Charming kisses Sleeping Beauty and then they have to live happily ever after, which is great for Prince Charming, because now he's got himself a princess, gets to live in a castle. We don't know what he was doing prior to that. We're told he's a prince, but, really?
What kind of prince?
in this version, though, he wakes her up and she does get a choice there to take her revenge if that's what she wants.
Yeah. And I mean, as an audience as well, we're given a good sort of 30 minutes of Jim. The first 30 minutes of the film, we know who Jim is as a character. He's a mechanic, he's a down-to-earth guy, he's in the lower class of the ship.
He's an awkward
he's
as well.
He's a bit awkward, yeah. He's a bit awkward. We have that scene with the jacket and stuff, at the start.
I really liked his awkward nature, that he wasn't Mr. Smooth or suave.
No, he wasn't a superhero either.
He uses the robot to pass the note to ask her out, because he just can't bring himself to do it otherwise. And there's a number of other spots where he's kind of... He plays an awkward character very well, actually. He's sort of... I've seen a lot. Being a computer programmer myself, I've seen a lot of awkward people.
Yes.
And been an awkward person in many situations, like now.
And even the fact when she asked him about why is he going to Homestead, and he's like, oh, well, for a better life, like for something different, like for something better than what I have back on Earth. I'm a mechanic, So you're getting this picture that for him, he's sort of done the best he can with his life on Earth, and here's a good chance for him.
He wants to actually make something that he's responsible for and he can be proud of, I think. Because he was pointing out that he's basically just repairs things that the robots can't repair themselves.
That's right, yeah.
And so he has no real creativity, no freedom to build.
Yeah. So that was a good viewing experience overall.
So let's move on then. I think we'd like to rate our relative preference for all the movies we've reviewed. And so far, this being the first movie we reviewed, I'm going to put it right at number 1, because it's really hard to beat this one without watching any others.
So we're going to be ranking the films as we go each podcast, and so this one has to be number 1.
Yeah.
There's no choice.
We're thinking of ranking it amongst every sci-fi film we've ever watched, but we're going to actually have a chance of putting these in some sort of order. It also means then that the worst one on our list may still well be better than the top 10 of many other lists. So that'll be good fun.
So I agree. This one's at the top. So sorry, what did you have, like a favourite scene in Passengers, a best scene, or something that stood out to you at all?
I had a couple of great scenes, just because of the way I am. There's a scene where he's had his fun. He's got himself into the top level suite. He's played basketball by himself. He's played computer games. And he's grown himself a big bushy beard, looking very castaway. In fact, I think they were going for the Robinson Crusoe look.
Yeah, definitely, I think.
Because he chucks a bottle. He's been drinking heavily and feeling a bit down. And he throws a bottle in rage and screams. And it just goes clunk and rolls on the deck. And he just kind of looks at it for a moment. I love the symbolism of that. The fact that he has a bit of a scream and throws it like a hissy fit. And it's just futile. The bottle doesn't break.
Yeah.
Just like his existence on the ship.
Yeah, he's stuck. He's locked in, isn't he? And it was good. It was good, that breakdown montage as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That he was trying to have some fun with the basketball and the dancing, and the beard is growing, but there's an irony that we get as the audience that in fact he's kind of going crazy. He's on his own. He can't get off. He's stuck. Yeah. I liked that scene.
Well, the other thing I liked about that scene is later in the film, there's kind of a similar scene that Aurora does, where she's discovered that she was woken up on purpose, and she, in her fury and frustration, she hurls a big vase at the glass looking out into the emptiness of space. And the vase shatters, but the glass is completely untouched. It's like it's kind of a mirror of the bottle scene, which is... But yeah, the bottle scene was really great. I'll just quickly over a couple others. Another one was the Aurora's jogging, whilst Jim is apologising and saying, hey, let's be friends, more or less. And Aurora's sort of getting a bit frustrated with this, and she gets to the end of the ship, because the ship's a kilometre long or something. So she gets to the end, it's a dead end, and she stops and has to turn around. And again, she shows her frustration. I quite like that. It speaks to the irony in me that here she's trying to run away, and his voice is coming at her the whole time. She can't get away from this. This relationship has to be sorted out one way or another. She decides to take a crowbar to him as the way of sorting that out. And I think they're the three scenes that stood out at the time. I think because of the irony in them, and it gave me a bit of a chuckle.
Yeah.
Which is a strange thing to chuckle about, is a guy getting to the edge of suicide and a woman feeling trapped by someone who's done her wrong. But
it showed
it presented it well.
Yeah, and it showed the situation, the seriousness, didn't it?
It summed it up.
They're stuck. The ship is powerful. They're in there. There's no way out. They're in a maze, aren't they? They're stuck. They're locked in.
Yeah, they're going to have to come out with something. So what about you? Do you have a favourite scene?
I think the one that really stood out and was just that there's a scene where the ship is malfunctioning and there's the lack of gravity suddenly kicks in, and Aurora's in the pool. And I just thought that was a really cool scene, that the fact that she's in the pool, the ship loses gravity, she's not realizing this, and then the water starts going in all directions. And it was really well done, I think, special effects wise. And she gets trapped in a water bubble. And we see Jim, he's just walking in his apartment sort of room or whatever. And we have the Lawrence Fishburne character as well, who's asleep, and he just floats up and
I love
floats
that.
back down.
He's got himself so tightly tucked in, and his arms are the only thing. His arms sort of float up for a bit, and they float back down. It's like that. That amused me greatly.
So he just floats up normally, floats back down. He doesn't wake up. He's fine. Jim is thrown about the room and gets a bloody nose. But really, Aurora is really put through the ringer, and she's in that pool. And I've never seen that. In a lot of other space movies and spaceship movies, you have lack of gravity, all gravity, and sometimes they malfunction, and of course they fly around. But that idea of being in a pool and then she was drowned, like she was literally drowning, and just at that last second it kicked back in and she hits the ground. She kind of starts breathing, so she's okay, but it's a real sort of moment of holding your breath for her. And I mean, it's probably a bit symbolic because she was in those throes of, debating the relationship and, thinking that he was still totally in the wrong. So that scene to me was lovely, really exciting, and really, I held my breath. A little fun scene was earlier in the story, and it's probably like it was a red herring sort of in the script writing, and that's when she's saying that she would know everyone because she's a writer, and they go around the pods and he kind of quizzes her.
Because writers don't make up.
No, they never make up anything. And he basically proves that she is wrong because everything she says about the people in the pods is wrong. But they get to the last person, and it turns out she's a midwife. And so I think that was a nice little red herring, because at this point the romance was at full swing. And straight away I thought, she's going to get pregnant. Like, that's going to be part of this story.
Oh, wouldn't that be terrible?
Stuck on the ship. And then I thought, well, then they've got the midwife here. They're setting that up. And I think I just totally fell for it. And I kind of, after the viewing, I was like, well, she never got pregnant. We never saw that. That was never detailed in the story. So I kind of liked that. It was a little narrative twist that it never actually happened.
When my wife and I talked about the possibility of them having children, and then I thought about it, and that was one of those, I think people refer to it as a fridge horror. So at first it was like, and they have a little family, and they're
Noah's Ark.
building up the garden and things. And I thought, hang on, those poor kids, they would be stuck there without any other kids or any other social interaction, no mates of their own to find, no boyfriends or girlfriends or partners, doomed to an even worse existence, I think, than their parents. Because at 90 years later or whatever, these kids, the rest of the passengers would wake up and you have a couple of sort of 70-year-olds maybe or 80-year-olds kicking around as being the kids.
Yeah, I know. It's
gone and
so they've sort of lived only a life on the ship and maybe not even make it. And then, without
terrible.
doctors or any sort of other, maybe a bit of extra help, the worst could happen as well.
No,
but
they didn't go there. They didn't go there.
They didn't go there. And it was probably, when you do what we just said, you don't get it. Third, a little bit just last is I like that scene that she beats the living shit out of Jim. So in that anger of realizing that he's, he awoken her, there is a scene where he's in bed and she runs in and she starts just punching and kicking and really pounding him. And I thought that was a great thing for her character. I thought that was really cool that they included that. And again, it kind of, debating what critics say about the movie, like this is sort of a counter argument to that. Again, I think that she had a say as a character and she came close. As you said, she picked up the crowbar and it was just like, oh, wow, she could kill him and he was willing to surrender to that a little bit. But I just liked that fact that she was really laying into him.
I also
gave
like
her dimension.
I also like the fact there that the cliche would have been that, he surrenders, he puts his hands down and goes, okay, you can smash my head in if you want. And she doesn't. And then she also then doesn't immediately fall in love with him or it turns out I actually am she's going, actually, I've realized that though I'm really upset with you, I'm not a murderer. I don't feel like actually murdering you out of that. Yeah. That's not me.
Yeah.
So she kind of puts it down as being, okay, now he's just a disliked person as opposed to someone she actually has to kill.
Yeah.
Which is, I like that she didn't flip from murderous rage to, he's given up. He's so sweet.
I love you. I love you again.
It turns out I do actually love you.
I sure do, yeah.
Yeah, like the whole thing. It's not until later on when she starts to realize that they're actually struggling. I think the fact that she sort of realized that he was woken by accident and was stuck there for over a year by himself, and she realized, okay, well, I still don't like him, but he's kind of. We're both kind of victims of this situation in a way.
Yeah.
Though she did get away. But to tell you the truth, I'm surprised he didn't wake up more people.
I mean, maybe that's what he should have done. Just woken up a whole bunch of people, and it's just like, well, you can't, we're all together with this now and we're going to have a bit of fun with it. Yeah, so there's some good scenes. Any worse scenes? Any scene that sort of you didn't actually like or thought was a bit unplausible or didn't work? I'll tell you mine was when Gus, so that's Lawrence Fishburne's character, when he actually dies, it was a bit too cheese factor for me because he sort of says, a line of wisdom and then he says, the ladies love my, a man in uniform kind of thing. And then he just carks it, like literally, wasn't this, I didn't mind the scenes before that with him and the fact that he had so many ailments and he was dying. I didn't even mind like the words of wisdom, but it just was like, here's a line of dialogue and then boom. I'm dead on the floor in the observatory room.
It's one of those things though, because you knew he had to die.
Yeah.
Because could you imagine that'd be a peculiar situation, the three of them sitting around for the next 30 years before he dies of old age. It was like,
that's right, yeah. So they had to make him sick quickly, didn't they? Yeah,
he had to die. And they also couldn't have him sacrifice himself to save the ship because that then would take away the drama between Jim and Aurora.
Yeah.
So, worst scenes, I would say the worst scene I thought was where he's holding the door as a shield against the venting fusion reactor. There's just, I give a lot of leeway to science fiction and things for drama purposes, but it's just, a fusion reactor is burning at the temperature of the sun. And so he's being blasted with not just a plasma in the 1,000,000 degrees centigrade range, but also so many reactive ions and free particles and neutrons and he really would have been disintegrated in an instant.
Yeah.
I would have preferred had it opened and he got blasted to the side and so he was kind of hanging on to the side a bit and it was shooting past him.
Yeah.
And something happened. But I'll forgive it a bit. I mean, really, because it didn't really matter what happened there. The point was that he was untethered from the ship and flying off.
And anyway, the point of that was that he was willing to sacrifice himself. You know, like again, because there was that question, like the thematic question, I think that we've talked about earlier, that he was then willing to sacrifice himself. Not just for her, but for the 5,000 people that were on the ship. That's what he actually said. He goes, "There's 5,000 people on this ship."
Yeah, you can't forget the 5,000 people.
No. So it was a bigger picture than just him and her. And the fact that she then, I do like in that scene where he decides to go out, because again, she's starting to question, and she's realizing she doesn't actually want him to go. She doesn't want him to die. And I don't think it's so much, again, the romance feeling. It's just more her going back to the crowbar. She kind of doesn't want to murder him. She doesn't want him to die. She wants him to stay, you know, and that was her leaning more towards, hang on, you don't have to die here. And he's saying, well, no, I have to try this. We have to do this. Otherwise the 5,000 die.
Yeah, everyone dies. Yeah.
And really in storytelling, that's us as an audience going, oh, Jim, doesn't really matter that you woke her up now, does it? You know, he's a good guy. He's trying to save everyone. It's an appeal to the emotions that this guy, yeah, he did wake her, and maybe that was a mistake, but here he is trying to save the day again. And he's not a hero, he's an everyday person, and he's just trying to save the day. It
was bringing his humanity back.
Yeah.
And the way you have to do it in movies, you've got to have a big dramatic action for that to happen, because in real life, I suppose it could take days, weeks, years for people to come to terms with, you know, traumas and so forth. In movies, they've got to come up with some, at least somewhat plausible way for someone to demonstrate that they have changed or grown or something. Yeah. And that's usually where you have them.
Yeah, definitely.
Sacrifice or try to sacrifice themselves.
But I do get your point. But then maybe it was that special space suit. It is in the future, so maybe that space suit could handle the nuclear fusion a bit more.
That's the thing. Is,
come on.
I'm willing to give these things.
I was willing to forgive it a little bit, you know. And the boots, you know, they locked him to the ground. You know?
Just that magnetic
boots. They were more powerful than the nuclear fusion.
That would have been, really powerful.
But that scene didn't bother me too much, because I suppose I was a bit sucked into the idea of, you know, he was sacrificing himself.
If I had to pick a worst scene, I agree with your deck chief dying, last gasp. It was very quick. Yeah. It was, but they had to sort of get him through and out of the way, and hand over. Really, his only purpose really was to provide the access key to the rest of the place and give a bit of context to say the ship is about to explode in 3 minutes.
Yeah, well, he gave them ability to get on the deck, and we saw how it all malfunctioned from that day that the meteorite hit and Jim was awoken, and, you know, the ship was kind of going to just keep disintegrating over time, wasn't it? You know, so he gave us all that information. And he did question Aurora over that. She said to him, he murdered me, and he says a great line actually, which is, a drowning man always pulls someone down with them.
Yeah.
And he's a drowning man, you know, and it was that, again, that was a question to her. You got to give him maybe a little bit of leeway, because he was here on his own for a year, and it's similar to a drowning man. You know,
I've seen a lot of criticism of that, where people are sort of saying, "Oh, how ridiculous! He just did this terrible thing." I have a feeling that a lot of people aren't kind of really putting themselves in the place,
shoes of the character. Yeah,
a year of solitary confinement, no matter how beautiful a cage, he's still knocking about for more than a year. I think it was like 13 months or something. Or 1 year and 3 weeks, I think he said. And then he listed off the days and hours. And it really, I'm surprised it took him that long. Like, I think that was a heroic effort to go that long with just an android as company. But actually, speaking of these things, androids and the technology involved, there's a few points or a few notes I got out of that, which were really good. Number one, I'm a computer programmer, so I'm always interested in the artificial intelligence and the computers involved. And there's a number of artificial intelligences there. And what I really liked is none of them were sentient. Arthur even was just a sophisticated chatbot who was quite good at that. But certainly the other AIs involved, the little help kiosk and the woman giving the lesson when he wakes up.
Yeah.
Very much chat bots.
Yeah.
Just reflecting questions back or just responding with you need to ask this human. Or you should. So it
was similar to
added a great
asking
realism.
Google, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah,
it wasn't anything.
Yeah. Hey Google, how do I do such and such? And then Google says, oh, I found this Wikipedia entry that says.
So that it was just the ability of those programs were just running, weren't they? There wasn't anything.
Yeah, they didn't throw any artificial. I think they had to do that also to increase his isolation, but it was a nice touch of realism.
Yeah, that's cool.
I also had a bit of a look then at the thing that fascinates me a lot in these movies is space travel, and it's quite nice that they weren't going faster than the speed of light. I think they were going 50%. He said that we don't have any technology currently that would allow you to accelerate to 50% the speed of light. It's about 1,000 times faster than the fastest accelerant we have at the moment. Because of course you can only go, the maximum speed a rocket can go is the speed at which you're shooting stuff out the back.
Yeah.
So it's the same as if you're running and you want to run faster than however fast, you've got to move your legs that fast.
Yes.
And if you can't move your legs fast enough, you're not going to go that fast. So, but given that, there's a few bits on there. So one of them was the gravity engine failing. This one, of course, popped up on a few people's radars in that there's no friction in space. So if you start your spaceship spinning to generate gravity, it will essentially keep spinning. It'll eventually stop because of entropy. The people moving around on board, slight redistribution of mass and so forth would eventually drain it. But probably for the 120 years, the spin they got when they left Earth would just keep going without any input. So I wanted to try and find a way to explain that ship actually needing some sort of positive input to maintain gravity. And the answer to that came from the ion drives they're using. So using ion thruster, it specifically says main ion drive offline or something. There's that sort of funny blue ring at the end shooting the blue fire at the back, which is largely what ion thrusters look like. The more powerful ion thrusters, which this one would be one of, because it didn't have, for example, a physical manifold. It was entirely electromagnetic. In order to get that sort of vortex where it's shooting at one end, it would have to be spinning like a funnel, which would induce a torque. Like if you have a helicopter and you turn the blades on and you don't have that little blade at the back or a second counter-rotating blade, your helicopter will spin in circles because of Newton's first law. Every action has an equal opposite reaction. You spin something clockwise, whatever's spinning clockwise, it will actually spin anti-clockwise. So if you've got something that's spinning a magnetic field, shooting ions out the back at the sort of rate and velocity that would be required for a kilometre-long ship to get to half the speed of light, then you're going to induce a big torque in the opposite direction, which means the whole ship would be spinning with or opposite to the magnetic field. So in order to maintain that at some sort of a reasonable rate, I would suggest, and in fact you'll notice that the bridge ring, which was inside, was actually spinning the opposite direction to the outer deck rings. You would need to have some sort of a drive to spin the ship or to slow it down to stop it from spinning out of control at half the speed of light and turning everyone into pancakes. So that's my explanation for why the gravity drive failure caused it to stop spinning and why it had to have some sort of positive input in order to maintain a reasonable gravity. It's probably some sort of fail-safe that would have let it go to zero gravity rather than spinning into a tornado of death, which itself, I think, being not a comedy or a horror, they weren't going to go that direction.
No.
But there you go. I think that's a reason why the gravity failed.
Yeah.
As opposed to, because everyone always asks that question on the line. So there we go.
And I mean, we saw how the ship responded to failures and trying to rectify those failures throughout the film. So
it was redirecting.
It was redirecting power, and that's why even when Gus does come up and he's like, oh, there's lots of little processing fires happening throughout the ships. Well, what's the theme here? And so to me, it felt very realistic, that concept, because it's similar to our computing now, isn't it? That one drive slows down and another drive will pick it up to try to sort of compensate, and fans kick in when things are heating up. And, so the engine systems that we currently use in technology. It was an expansion of that. It felt very realistic to me.
I like that a lot of the tech there, some of it pushed into the realms of the fiction side. The fiction, like into Arthur C. Clarke, he always says that the sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah.
I don't think he always says that, but he has at least said it once, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's where we get this, like the fusion engine. We have fusion reactors now, but they don't have glass windows that you can see in, and they don't have sort of free spinning fusion. So clearly they've got much more advanced technology in terms of magnets and superconduction, and the control computer must have been a quantum computer in order to be able to manage it in the way it did. But so that was quite good.
And I mean, the ship design itself, like when, at the start of the film, and we see it a few times, if you just, the big wide shot of the ship, it's something I have seen in science magazines, as them discussing the possibility of space travel, getting, quicker and better, equipped for us as humans. That design, I'm not talking about the specifics of the actual thrust or the engine, but just looking at it as big, spinning thing, a shield out the front for meteors and things like that. I've seen it before in fiction, in science magazines, talking about the future. And so straight away I saw it, I was like, oh, I've kind of seen this before, this design, It's not something that's now, but it looks realistic. And then because those first couple of minutes of the film, we see the meteor shower coming, there's warnings of it, we see the computer responding to it, and then it gets hit with, this giant meteor, which is obviously, pierces the ship. And we see all these warning systems go off, and then the computer trying to heal itself in certain ways. And obviously then Jim is a failure that awakens, and then we follow him. He's the human, of course. But I thought that was all very realistic, actually. And I did see online they talked about, the little gadgets they used, the little screen that he had. That was actually something they built. They weren't using little green screens. Traditionally they use green screens and it's all CGI'd.
Yeah.
They were actually running off gaming platforms, and they were realistic little screens that they built them for the movie. So they tried to kind of, obviously artificial, they weren't doing what they were doing, but they actually tried to make them a bit more realistic for the actors. So it looked good to me.
Yeah, I saw shots of the sets, some outtakes and so forth, and most of the sets were constructed.
Yep.
What was it? The main gallery and so forth they're walking through was constructed. And I have to say, you're talking about the fairest failures, and the one that I found, again, it's strange what I find amusing, but when Arthur malfunctions and he's like zipping backwards and forwards, and then he stops at the end of the bar and slams his face to the bar and drags up, knocking all the glasses off.
It was bizarre, wasn't it?
If you're talking about a call out to other movies, how many spaghetti westerns and so forth back in the 70s?
Correct, yeah.
Did the bad guy get punched in the face, thrown onto the bar, and then dragged up the bar? I thought that was a bit of an homage to that.
Yeah.
I found it most amusing that he was sort of, and he kept his grin. Yeah. This amiable grin as he got knocked about the place.
Smashing it and doing it to himself, of course. Yeah. But you're right, that idea of someone being dragged across the bar, in a Western movie, definitely. So what about some of the technical aspects of the film? Did anything stand out to you?
No. I was looking at the technology. I was looking at trying to figure out how you'd get to half the speed of light.
Yeah, and I was focusing more on the technicality, so I can take that up as a bit of a thing.
How many fusion generators they'd need. Yeah. Actually, I've got a little bit of trivia here, because I was looking at fusion generators. They've got one there like to produce their electricity, and I thought, well, I have no clue how much power you get from a fusion generator.
Yeah.
So I found an estimate for a small to moderate size fusion generator is 1.5 gigawatts, nearly 2 gigawatts. Right. So in context, Western Australia has a peak capacity of about 4.5 gigawatts. So 2 fusion generators could basically run all of Western Australia.
Yep.
And 8 to 10 generators could run all of Australia in its most peak hot weather power usage. So in comparison to the hundreds of generators we have now.
So it's a super powerful
Oh,
machine.
it's very powerful. And they've gone full science fiction on this. So you'd imagine they'd have a far more efficient version than that.
Correct. Yeah.
So but anyway, I just found that fascinating. So that's what I was focusing on.
That's fine. Yeah.
And fusion bombs, that would get you fast enough.
Yeah.
Probably, but
it's a powerful thing. And I mean, look at at the end of the movie when Jim is floating through space, untethered, he throws the
hatch cover
to sort of, rebound himself away, and that thing just gets disintegrated, doesn't it? So
straight through the iron drive.
Yeah.
Off it goes.
But filmmaking side, there was a lot that I thought the film did in good ways. And I mean, I'll just probably quickly say acting wise, Chris Pratt, he's suddenly come out of nowhere, hasn't he? He's been around floating in the sort of back streams, I think, of Hollywood a little bit. I've loved him as Andy Dwyer from Parks and Rec, so he's got that comedy aspect to him. And I think you said at the start, being a bit awkward, he fitted that really well. He had that awkwardness to him. And even in that sort of desperation, isolation, there was a bit of comedy going on because, he's walking around in the nude. We see that he tells the cleaning robots off, and then he throws some food at them like dog, and one of them comes
lures
back.
Them back.
He
suddenly realised he's just chased away the only company he has.
a
Roomba.
Yeah, how he talks with Arthur and all those sort of things. So I thought that was really good. Jennifer Lawrence is great. She's a very strong female lead, suits Hollywood. And they do suit each other, don't they? I think
I watched a few interviews with them together, and they really seem to have a good bit of camaraderie together. That's good.
Being that this script was actually around for 10 years before it finally went into production, there's a lot of female actresses that were kind of thrown at this, and different actors. Keanu Reeves was one that was really interested for quite a while, and I believe his production company had something to do with the getting the script off the ground as well. But then he was looking for something a bit darker than this film. And Lawrence Fishburne, I mean, he does show up. He's very minor. And when, of course, straight away there's a clear connection. Do you remember what science fiction film he was in about 20 years ago?
Other than The Matrix, it would be...
no, it's a spaceship science fiction.
Horizon.
Yeah, another...
That Australian dude from... Well, actually, there's a Jurassic Park connection there, isn't there?
There is as well, yeah.
Because...
but I was thinking
Chris
more
Pratt
just...
was Jurassic World as well.
Yeah.
With... What's his name, that Australian...
Sam Neill.
Sam Neill.
Yes. So there is a
Lawrence Fishburne on a spaceship.
2 degrees of separation there of actors. But, I mean, apart from, as I said, the scene where he dies is a little bit cheesy. I mean, the scene where he actually says to Jim, you woke her up, and he goes, he admits to it. And then Lawrence Fishburne just goes, damn. And you don't get many actors that can deliver a line like that. But again, just seeing him pop out of nowhere, he's something like, who planted this tree in my ship?
I got a real rush of hope at that point. When you hear that, you go,
someone else.
Yeah, because they've both been trying to get into the crew quarters and all sorts of things. Yeah.
And it was good. It was a good game breaker, that. And then, Arthur does, Michael Sheen, plays Arthur the android. And to me, I was just loving that because of that Shining homage, which is definitely there. Because if you bring up what Arthur looks like and then the bartender from The Shining, you can bring those images up, and they're dressed identical. Their hair is very similar. And it's funny because in The Shining, he's a ghost and he's creepy, and he does do a lot of those cliches, whereas in this one, he's kind of extra sweet and nice as the robot. So, yeah, I really liked those 4 key actors. Weird that Andy Garcia, the Australian actor, is suddenly the captain at the end for 10 seconds of film. I don't know if you picked up on that. Sorry, but a big actor like Andy Garcia has been in all sorts of things over the years. Huge career.
I saw he's listed on the cast of it, and
he doesn't even have a line, So I'm not too sure what happened there. I'm not sure if they edited something out or what the deal is. But to me, the winning part of the technicality of this film is the design itself, the production design, and they were nominated for a Oscar. So there's a couple of guys, Guy Hendricks Diaz and Gene Sedina. I just was blown away, not only by the bar because I was seeing that The Shining, but I loved how the ship looked. The straight away with those pods. The long shot of all the pods, and they looked like real pods to me. As you said, like a lot of the sets.
Did you notice the number of fire extinguishers in the scenes?
Yeah, I did.
When I was watching it through a second time, to sort of pick up on things, and I'm noticing certainly when he's first woken up, I think pretty much every scene in the background is a fire extinguisher.
Yeah.
I don't know if they were intending some sort of message there. I was going, is that... And didn't notice it in later scenes.
Yeah,
the fire extinguishers sort of seemed to disappear, so I wasn't sure if they're meaning something there, but the detail of having a fire extinguisher in crew living quarters, crew living, passenger quarters and things. Yeah, it meant that someone was thinking about it.
Yes, definitely. But I did notice that, but I mean, you just kind of, to me, it was just such an art piece, the production design, because of the curves, the lights, it was all very blended. And a bit that really did also stand out for me is the Captain's Bridge, that it did have that curve on the inside. And it was interesting that each time that when Jim first tries to break in, and then later with Aurora, you see the bridge and it disappears. The lines are curved, like it's going up or down, Yeah,
it looks like they're in a little room.
Yeah, but they have the look. They look down there, and then but we never see them walk down it. We never see them go down it, and it's eerie to me, but in a good way. Like I was just like, wow, it was so three-dimensional.
Such a different place because the living area was all swooping designs and cruise ship, hotel.
It felt like a cruise ship,
And then the crew part, as you said, or the bridge ring, was just that almost compared to the kilometre long open vistas, it was like a little claustrophobic. The curvature was such that it looked like they were basically in a little room with just one door with lots of scorch marks around it where they tried to get in.
Yeah, so. But I liked all that, and I can understand it being nominated. The pool, again, I thought was cool. How, like you have this, cruise ship kind of idea, to the extreme, and that they were playing off that idea throughout the film with their rooms as well. The fact that he was in poor man's little squishy room at the start, and then he gets the upmarket room that he breaks into, and she's in an upmarket room. But the pool design was really great as well. Sound wise, they were nominated for an Oscar and some other awards for sound, and I can understand more on a second viewing. At the start, there's that Elvis JXL mix song from the 90s that we might know or remember, which is about having conversation. And during that scene, that's the montage of Jim breaking down from being too isolated, There's also on the second viewing, I noticed with the music, there's an eerie beat that they use for the ship. So it's kind of like a bit of a motive of what the ship is malfunctioning. And it's sort of, being that the film's not a scary film, like it's not trying to be a horror, they could have upped that, but they kept that really subtle. And I noticed it more on a second viewing than on the first, but I thought that was pretty cool.
Interesting thing there, because I looked and found that, they got nominated for their sound score, original sound score, whatever that award is for. And I couldn't think of any of the sound or music in the show. Like, I thought, gee, that can't have been that good. But I thought, actually, maybe it was so good that it just blended into the entire movie. There was no point. You just said there was a little more conversation song.
Yeah.
I only realised that when you said that then, and when it was, I went, actually, I think that was there.
So it's that Elvis JXL mix.
Yeah, it's sort of, so I got to say that there have been movies where the sound has slapped me in the face quite hard, and they weren't intending it to, but certainly this movie, it all blended so well. It wasn't about the music, so there weren't any, there was no let it go.
Yeah, well, I agree. The music on the first viewing didn't really stand out to me at all, but on a second one I was kind of thinking and at that point I still didn't realise it was nominated, but I was listening to it a bit more intently as you do, and I did, as I said, notice the motive and stuff like that. And then lastly, narrative, and we've probably already talked a bit about this really, but like narrative, it pretty much was the good old Blake Snyder beats. They were all there, I felt.
Since studying that, I can't watch movies now without seeing them all happen.
Those moments,
I was watching last night Gulliver's Travels with Jack Black, and there was the opening scene where he's the mailroom boy.
Yep.
And then the new worker that he's showing around, that's how we're introduced to him, just turns around and says to him the theme of the movie, you know, like
page 5, here's the theme.
Yeah, like here's the theme just quoted directly to him, you know, go out and do something. Oh, okay. And then I just leaned over to my wife and said, oh, that was a theme stated. Shortly we're going to get the catalyst, which is going to be the main part of the story.
Yeah.
And sure enough, the very next scene, he writes or plagiarizes a bit and he's sent on his trip.
Yeah, and we have that. Hollywood's big on those kind of beats, and I think Passenger, I found on the first viewing, I was like, oh, this is ticking those boxes. I think I sort of said that before. Like it did take me on that adventure that Hollywood does. And I think it did it very well. You know, it's a film that does tick all those boxes. It doesn't let you down, which was something I like, kept me going. You know, if you think about Blake Snyder, at the beginning of the film, it's the ship. At the end of the film, it's the ship. They're opposites. What's happened to the ship? You know, the characters aren't at the start and they're not at the end, you know, Jim and Aurora. So straight away you've got those opposite images. You know, at the end it's their effect on the ship, which is that they've grown, you know, they've lived there for 90 years, you know, and their effect on the ship. At the start it's very sterile, it's on its own, it's lonely. You know, at the end it's had that modification. But you know, we have an 11-minute mark. Catalyst, right on the 11-minute is when he realizes he's totally alone and he will die on the ship, that he has the 90 years or 88 years, whatever it is. Good old debate. What is he going to do? Depression. Is he going, and then that comes to that pivotal point where he could kill himself. If you remember, he could walk outside of the ship without a spaceship and decides not to. So, you know, good old debate. He has a ticket out of the place, really. He could kill himself, but he can't do that. And then he decides on, and then the B story, Aurora. Suddenly, you know, I think it's the same.
He trips over the bottle.
He trips over the bottle. Yeah. So, you know,
I did like that as well. That the bottle that he threw in rage and didn't break, and he was like, upset by that.
That's right.
Turned out to be the thing that introduces him to Aurora.
Yeah, definitely. So that happens, and then meeting her, there is the moral question, debating. Should I wake or not? You said before he's the Robinson Crusoe, and then he goes, I'm going to shave today. I'm going to, you know, and he starts cutting him and he's looking at himself in the mirror going, don't wake her. And the next shot is him waking her. So, you know, but you can see where his mental state is at. And then fun and games, you know, it's two people on a ship. What are they going to get up to? Well, a man and a woman. What are they going to get up to, really? Fall in love.
Dance off.
You know, and they say they play, they date, they romance, you know, they have fun with each other. As you said, he sends her the little robot. And there's a nice little thing with that from her, I think, which is, you took long enough. And at the end of the film, she says the same thing when he gives her the ring. She sort of plays off that as well, like, you took long enough. Midpoint as well, right on an hour. This is pretty much a 2-hour film. Midpoint, what's the midpoint, sorry?
What
do you think? You know, when everything turns, fun and games is over.
It's the opposite, isn't it?
What's the opposite? What is the pivotal point of the story, the midpoint, you think?
Oh, what do I think the midpoint of this particular one was when Arthur, it's a peculiar scene. I'm trying to remember the way they did it, but Arthur said, how are you all going? It's all good. Oh, yes. So and he says, is everything okay, Jim? Oh, yes, there's no secrets between us.
That's right, yeah.
And he walks off, and that's really where my heart went, oh, Jim, why'd you say that? Because, and then so they go, oh, yes, of course, wasn't it a shame that he had to wake you up? He's like, you're what?
Midpoint, crashing down, because he was going to propose to her, I think, you know, he'd made her the ring. And, her finding out that he had actually deliberately awoken her. So she was stuck, whereas he wasn't. So perfect, like right on that middle point of the film, you know, so as an audience member, you're going, yep, okay, now the shit hits the fan, you know, what happens now? And I liked that did that well, I thought. And, you know, bad guys closing in, you know, the ship is, after that point as well, the ship really starts to malfunction. You know, we've had little malfunctions, the major stuff starts happening. Gus then awakens and really, he is there to to give them that little bit more information about the ship.
Extra bit of the inspiration, which leads on to
and
the
he
next
debates,
part.
debates that. But the fact that he is dying, the ship kind of killed him in awakening him, and he does die quickly, which is an all is lost, a whiff of death. He is the whiff of death. And then Dark Night of the Soul is that, well, basically the ship is going to terminate. So they have the choice to save themselves, save the 5,000 people. And I think I said it before really, but that Jim is deciding I'm going to go do the reactor. And I liked that. I liked that she questions his decision and sort of saying she's questioning herself. And Aurora knows that if he goes out there, he's probably going to not come back. And that is a really good breaking into 3 is her telling him basically not to go, that she wants him to come back, because that's a transition of that whole, debate on he's not a murderer anymore,
You know what I think would have been extra dramatic in that point where she's been presented with the fact that Jim is going to go out and quite probably die, is had they already brought up the fact, oh, you can put yourself back into sleep in the auto dock. If they'd said that beforehand, then that point there, which is like, well, I'm going to go off and die, would suddenly give her an easy way out. It's like, because if he's dead, then I can just take the auto dock and I'm asleep and I've back to my old life, which would have made that decision, that the hesitance of hers go, no, I don't want to. Yeah. But maybe they didn't want to spoil the surprise oh, now she does have a way out, but she just decides to hang around. Yeah.
And I mean, that's a good point, but the way they did it does also work, because it's just, again, giving a character an out, isn't it? Like she, by that point, it's like she's brought him back to life. She still now has another out, like she doesn't have to stay with this stalker. She can still get out, and he's okay with that. And then we have finale, the reactor. He goes to the vent. We discussed that before. She risks her own life, gets him, grabbing the tether. She can't reach him,
that bit
pull him
reminded
back
me of
in.
The Martian.
Yeah, definitely.
I read the book beforehand, which is very similar, but the movie, The Martian, also does that plan. Saying, I think the book gave you a better feeling that he was probably going to die.
Yes, yeah.
Than the movie, because you're going to expect him to live in the movie, but it was the same sort of level of tension there, because he could die at that point and still have a good movie if they wanted to have kind of that bittersweet ending, the sad ending.
Yeah, the sad ending.
I'm glad that I don't like sad endings.
No.
They shit me, tell you the truth. Like,
I mean, really, a sad ending is a bit of a anti-hero movie, which has to be structured a bit different to these ones. Like, these ones are not, and even The Martian. The Martian's not really an anti-hero movie, so he does have to kind of, if it's sad, just to make that kind of ram home the drama. I think as an audience, that's when you're more disappointed. But other films like Donnie Darko, where it is an anti-hero film, you go on that journey and you go, that's great.
It's not going to end. Yeah, it's not going to end well for anyone.
No. So and there's so it's a great dramatic, and I did think as a whole structure, we had the setup. Oh, it's an interesting question. Then we have romance for a good chunk, 30 minutes of the film. Then we have kind of bad things happening for 30 minutes, and then we have the main characters trying to make everything good again with the ship and with each other. And I think
a little bit of metaphor.
Fair. But heading to a good, what we want from Hollywood. Great climax, he's going to be blasted into space. She has to dive out. Oh, she can't reach him. She's got to grab the tether. Oh, he's dead already. Got to put him into a machine. You got to remember the code to the machine that Lawrence Fishburne gave you. So, the whole time you're kind of biting your nails going, come on. So there's a lot of good tension. The good writing, I think, really building up the tension. It was no wonder that this was a script that lots of people wanted. They just couldn't get it made. And then, the final image, that they did decide to make a life. And even though we don't get to see it, they did make a life. When the captain, Andy Garcia, comes out for 10 seconds, we see the tree is growing, the robots are doing different things, there's plant life, they've altered the water. They've had a life, haven't they? They've had a rich life, which again is that theme.
They've had that effect. They're both looking to have an effect on the world.
They are, and they've affected the ship, haven't they?
She wanted to produce her masterpiece novel or documentary piece, whatever it was, and he wanted to, I think he wanted to build a little house for himself.
Yeah.
And so they both
did
that
their
anyway,
dream.
even though they didn't make it a homestead,
Yeah,
which is coming back to that theme that Arthur suggested of finding your sense of place regardless of your actual location.
Yes, yeah. So yeah, I liked it, and I think technicality-wise, it did that well. So good sound. You know, the actors they chose were suited those roles, and they were good. You know, in those roles. Fantastic production design. I love it. I think if you're into design of sets and stuff, this is top notch.
Particularly because a lot of it was actually made. It wasn't computer graphics on a green screen, which would have been easy to do with their budget.
Yeah, and a couple of nice homages, as I said, like The Shining, 2001. Wall-E as well, really, the sort of the way the spaceship, the design, the idea of the spaceship traveling people through space, you know, keeping them alive.
Years or something.
So yeah, that was some nice homages there. I think.
Well, speaking of the writer, it's two things about him. One, he's a massive nerd, which is quite likely since his dad. What was his dad was an electronics engineer. His mum's a computer programmer, so he didn't have much hope in that. But do you know any other films he's written? Some science fiction in there.
Yeah, there's a couple that have come out recently. You've got me on the. That wasn't something I wrote any.
So he was at fault for Prometheus.
Okay, yes,
so he wrote that one.
Right.
I don't know what his original script was actually. The way Prometheus had a few story issues.
Okay.
So he was involved in that one, but he's also dealing with Dune, which is coming out very soon.
Right.
Next year, I think, which I'm really looking forward to, because I saw the original. What was his name? Lynch. What's that guy's name? The director.
David Lynch. Is that who you mean?
Yes. So back in 84.
Like the Twin Peaks stuff? Yeah.
Because it was actually Kyle MacLachlan was in that as well.
Yeah.
He did, I think, actually a really good job of the original director's cut.
Yeah, Lynchy's going to give you a weird world.
Yeah, but they went over it and put all these voiceovers in and stuff, which I think totally ruined the magic.
It was the 80s.
So that's a thing I picked up on Spate because I've been following Dune production and the casting. They've got every actor who's ever done anything in the past 10 years is doing it. They even just got Jason Momoa.
Right.
He seems to be. It's strange because I wasn't that convinced that he's like an A-list actor. You know, like the roles he had as Khal Drogo and then Conan, that dreadful Conan reboot, and the an Aquaman, which is kind of an awkward role to try and shine in, being that it's all green screen, it's all special effects, it's all that. But now he's clearly impressed some people, so I'm really keen to see what he does in Dune, actually, because it's always nice to see actors being put through their paces a bit.
Definitely.
So, I was also looking at this movie, and there's a little bit there of social commentary, which I quite liked. Again,
very serious tone there. Sorry.
Well, it was a little bit of. I found it humorous, and I think it was presented as a humorous thing, but it actually has quite a serious, comment to make, which is he gets into the mess hall to get his food, and up comes the coffee choice. He chooses, mocha latte, frappuccino, or whatever. It's like, you're not available. You can't do it. And he goes down to the next one, and then he just goes through all of the very last one. Bing.
Large coffee.
You got it. And it's like, sort of presenting a caste system. It's like, here's everything you're not getting. You can't have any of that. But we're going to show you those options anyway and allow you to... Because really, they know he doesn't have access to it.
Yeah.
So wouldn't you just say, have a coffee? There's your coffee. Instead, putting it in his face, you're poor. Sorry.
Yeah, and then when Aurora arrives, she has an expensive breakfast as well.
The gold class.
Yeah, and she makes a comment on that, and she's like, "Oh, you're eating healthy," and he goes, "I'm not entitled to that breakfast." So she gets him that.
Yeah, it's that sort of the ignorance of the privileged.
That's right.
They go, doesn't everyone just get this?
Yes, that's it.
No. The poor people get the rough stuff.
And she does also, in that conversation early with him, say, "Did you pay full price?" And he's for the ticket for the space ride, and he's like, "No, because I'm working when I get there for them."
Yeah,
so
he's took I can't remember what they called it.
They did call it something, didn't they? So again, there's a reference where she's not on that. She's just a full paying ticket.
Yeah, so he's going to give like 20% of everything he ever earns in his entire life.
Yeah.
Which is sort of presented as this downside, but you think, well, isn't that just tax?
Yeah.
So I guess maybe he's got to pay tax as well. I don't know, but yeah, it was, again, he's clearly...
a class structure there, And the rooms are also evidence of that, aren't they?
Yeah, when he has to break into the top quality room and he's like, oh my God, this is incredible. So I thought there was... I don't think they really made too much issue of that because it didn't come up anywhere else. He seemed to have full access to the bar. There was no reference. There was no like, you look like a whiskey man. He says, sure, give me a single malt. He says, how about this, blended synthetic? Like there was none of that business. It was just whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
But there was an outtake where he asked for a Bud Light.
Right.
which I don't know that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a really good point. For me, there is that bit of that social commentary, that theme of isolation for humans. Humans, we're social beings. We love being around other humans, don't we? We love talking. We love communicating. Like I said, when he's going crazy, he tells the cleaning robot to go away, and then he realizes, no, you are my connection. And really, then that's the question. Once he realizes he could wake someone else up, he's telling himself not to do it, but at the same time, he's being pulled in that direction.
What else can he do? What else can he do, really? I'm surprised he didn't, just sort of wake everyone up or something.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I think there's a connection, and I might be overreading it, but there's a connection to The Shining. In The Shining, the man, Jack Nicholson's character, Jack, goes crazy and tries to kill his wife and child from isolation in being in a great big hotel. In this, he awakens someone and that is labelled murder. Aurora labels that as murder a couple of times. But then he's trying to rectify that really for the whole film. So it's almost like the same question that The Shining raises. How would you react to being isolated in a hotel in the snow? That's The Shining. Or you're isolated in this spaceship, in outer space. You've got this big, beautiful location. Both films have it. You've got, access to this great hotel, basically, in both scenarios, whiskey at hand. But you're on your own. You're basically on your own, and so that mental breakdown, that isolation.
All the red rum you can drink.
That's right.
So we've gone over Passengers this week. In 2 weeks' time, we're covering The Lobster.
The Lobster.
I'm looking forward to that one.
Me too.
Its sense of dark humour, I think, really appeals to me. As I said, my favourite scenes in that movie were acts of futile frustration and a bartender having his face wiped on the bar. So if you're going to follow along with us next time, I suggest you watch The Lobster before going in because there's going to be spoilers. I can't spoil anything now because I haven't watched it. I don't know what it is.
No, either have I, but I like the look of the premise of The Lobster. So definitely, if you are following us, check it out, Google it, see what it's about. And we'll be discussing it at length next time, like we did today about Passengers.
Good night.
Good night. See you later.